Thank you, Ming, for the introduction. The organizers placed me in this session on inequality because I've spent a bulk of my career to the study of social inequality and social stratification. In sociology, I believe the most important subfield is inequality and social stratification research, most rigorous, most interesting, and most important. But then you stop doing what you love to do until something else is more important. So what is more important than sociology and stratification research in particular? Not economics, if you're an economist. If economics is more important, I would have studied it a long time ago. Two things happened in recent years. One is a deterioration of the relationship between China and the US, and that began around 2016 or 17, that has occupied my attention beyond sociology. Second was COVID that came out in the beginning of 2020. So I've studied US-China relations, particularly attitudes of Americans toward China and Chinese attitudes toward the US. And also, especially after COVID-19, the relationship became worse, and attitudes of Chinese toward US and attitudes of Americans toward China have got worse. So let me give you empirical studies on the two topics. I will be very ambitious. I will cover 7 studies in these two topics. Public opinion toward a country can be viewed or evaluated as one key indicator of its soft power abroad. And to me, as a sociologist, I still believe in empirical evidence, in empirical reality. Even though many people don't like what I'm going to present, public opinion is a social fact, whether you like it or not. I have many dear friends, American friends, Mary, Bob, sit in the front row, and if you talk to them about Americans don't like China, they will be upset because they say, I like you, I like Chinese. I come to China, I come to Hong Kong, I like Chinese. And same is true of my friends in Beijing. And they think Americans like China as a fact, as a truth, because they believe that to be so. No, it's not true. Social fact is beyond your wish, your own ideology, and your idealism. It's a fact. Let's see some of the facts. Across a number of advanced societies, developed societies from Australia all the way to Japan, there is a general trend that is unmistakable. Most people in those countries, developed countries, look at the UK, 74% hold unfavorable views of China. Look at Japan, 86% of them hold negative views about China. And the increase in unfavorable views of China has been very sharp, especially after COVID-19. We started to study trends in attitudes toward China before COVID-19, and we try to understand why this is so. We believe in conclusion, let me give you the conclusion beforehand, we believe COVID-19 has contributed causally towards a decline of Americans' attitudes toward China and Chinese attitudes toward US. The first part is American attitudes toward China, and I will introduce 3 studies. And Chen He, assistant professor from Chinese University of Hong Kong, would you stand? She's one of the key collaborators as a postdoc at Princeton University. So this is actually not an easy topic to study. Because if you want to study a cause, then some units of analysis are exposed, and some units of analysis are not exposed, and you can do propensity score, whatever. But COVID, it was something that every American was exposed to. So everybody was treated, so to speak. So how do you study the causal effect of COVID on attitudes toward China? It's not easy topic. I will give you 3 studies. They all attempt to establish a causal effect of COVID-19 on attitudes toward China Americans. The first, this is with Chen He, published in Social Psychology Quarterly. We capitalized on the fact that even though everyone was exposed to COVID, but some people were affected more strongly than others. And so there is a difference in severity of COVID locally. And the other one will capitalize on timing of exposure. This is on geographic variation in severity. So this is called dosage design. Some people affected more than others across the country. So what we did was to use, again, geography. Geography was a friend to us because it provided some variation in the severity of exposure to COVID. So that was a research design. We divide the country into clusters of counties, geographic clusters, and then we measure the severity of COVID cases across geographic units. And then we conducted an online survey using representative sample. And then we want to know if local COVID incidence rate has an effect on attitudes, Americans' attitudes toward China. And then we use the attitudes toward other countries as kind of control. So it's in some ways a kind of difference in difference design to see if severity of COVID has a differential effect on attitudes toward China compared to attitudes toward other countries. So we conducted an online survey in 2020, August 2020, and then we constructed severity index of COVID around clusters of counties, contiguous counties, and we use zip code of our survey operation to measure local residents' severity. And this is a key result. As you can see, the COVID severity has a significant negative relationship with attitudes toward China. And that is not true in their attitudes towards other countries. Indeed, Americans, this is maybe, I'll go back to Arthur's earlier comment, Americans actually like Japan more than they like the US. That is true. We have a number of studies that show that Americans like Japanese more than they like Americans themselves. But in overall, you don't see the same relationship between local severity and attitudes toward Japan and America. So we showed that local severity seems to have a negative relationship with their attitudes toward China. That's the first study. I'm going to zip through and to the second study. I already mentioned that Americans like Japanese more than like Americans themselves. And why is it then, after COVID-19, we know there is a rise of anti-Asian sentiment among Americans. Again, my friends, American friends, would like to deny we love Asians. Why there's anti-Asian movement in the US? There has been, and there is anti-Asian. You just don't know about it. It's a social fact. We actually capitalize on this fact because Asians look at Asians on the street. You cannot tell a Chinese American or from a from China and from a Japanese American born in the US. And by their appearances, it's very hard to tell, for ordinary Americans to tell Chinese from China from other Asians who might be native in the US. So anti-Asian kind of movement in America partly is due to the Americans' the ability to distinguish Chinese from other East Asians, Americans who look similar like them. So actually, anti-Asian sentiment in the US, we believe, mainly came from their hatred of Chinese from China. So we designed an experimental study, online American study, and this is with Qian He again. And this is the video, if you like to watch it. Actually a well-known political figure in New York City. She lashed out against native-born Korean American in Central Park in New York City. It's recorded on YouTube if you like to watch the video. You're not from here, you're from China, aren't you? Go back to China. So what we did was design an experiment. So this is a photo, 3 photos, my colleague at Peking University. His name is Ren Qiang. Some of you know him. We have 3 faces: unhappy face, normal face, and happy face. We believe facial expression will affect respondents' evaluations of that person. Then we give him 3 jobs, 3 national identities and 3 jobs. One, we tell the respondent, American respondent, he is Chinese in Beijing. Second, we tell the respondent, he is a Japanese in Tokyo. The third, we tell him he is an East Asian in Asian American in New York City. So we give 3 fictitious national identities. Everything else is the same because it's random, it's orthogonal randomization with 3 dimensions: facial expression, national identity, and occupation. The 3 occupations will be janitor, doctor, and computer programmer. So by these combinations, then it's 3 by 3 by 3, 27 possibilities, and we present the fictitious figure to respondents, ask them to evaluate the person on the basis of competence, warmth, and trustworthiness, and whether you like the person or not. It's completely randomized. So this is in response, in case there are economists here always question your identification, this is my way to answer your question. It's causal, and it can claim causal because this is experiment, true experiment, not quasi-experiment. I will show you other results from quasi-experiment, but this is true online experiment. You already saw an earlier example earlier this morning. So let me give you the main result. We are talking about the identical person. But if the person is given China affiliation in Beijing, the person is liked much less, is trusted much less, is evaluated to be less in competence in warmth. I think there's also moral dimension is also less. Everything is much less. Everything else is equal. Of course, when Ren Qiang smiles, then American respondents like him more. So that is also true. It fits our expectations beautifully. But the point is that for identical person, otherwise identical, if the person is from Chinese in China, the person is viewed negatively by Americans. And this is causal because this is an online experiment, survey experiment. And the other studies, it's mainly driven by Americans who feel China's threat. When they feel China's threat is strong, then the nationality effect is larger, is more pronounced. That's a second study. The third study we used with Junming and Gammon Cook, a graduate student and research scientist at Princeton. We are still in the process of publishing the paper. We use social media data, Twitter data. And we use the timing of exposure. So Twitter, we know everyone, and everyone's, not only your posts, but also posts of your friends, who you identify as a friend. And individuals' exposure to COVID is different. In some regions, for some people, they knew about COVID immediately after China's lockdown. For some people, there is no mention of COVID until much later point. So what we did is to treat the exposure, the first mention of COVID as time of exposure. Then we look at your attitudes toward China before and after. So this is China was mentioned quite a lot in social media, but the exposure is different. For some people, exposure was early. Some other people, exposure was much later. But let me give you our causal kind of estimation. So we estimate that after being exposed to COVID in social media, their attitudes toward China declined significantly afterwards. So the decline of attitude toward China lasted all the way to the end of this chart. So from social media data, not survey data, we also find a kind of causal effect or regression discontinuity or difference in difference, if you want to call it, because we do know everyone's attitude toward China before exposure. So if you difference that out, we find that exposure to COVID has a strong effect, a negative effect on attitudes toward China. So this is from American side and their attitude toward China. How about the other side? So this is an unpublished work, just being published. We have studied Chinese attitudes toward the US. And we have 4 separate studies on this topic. And this is in collaboration with Junmin Huang from Princeton, Yuchen He, another He from Peking University, and Chen Yuan, you may know the name, from British Columbia, and other, Ji Zhou is a social psychologist at Chinese Academy of Sciences. So this is a large team of researchers. And we conducted 4 studies on the topic using different data sources and different methods. Let me take you through them. So why do we expect an effect of COVID on Chinese attitude towards the US? First of all, Americans' attitudes toward China have declined significantly over the period. They expect a reciprocal decline among Chinese attitudes toward the US. That's the first reason, reciprocity. The second is trade war initiated by former president of the US, Donald Trump. So Donald Trump has affected US-China relations and also affected Chinese attitudes toward US for 2 reasons. One, he was quite hostile in his speech. Second, he was seen as incompetent as a political leader. So Chinese attitude toward US declined after the election of Trump. And Trump trade war has had a negative impact on Chinese attitude toward the US. And more recently, COVID-19, since 2020, made it much worse, exacerbated the declining trend. Actually, part of that is not political. It was mainly for a while until the end of 2022, Chinese perceived China much better in handling, Chinese government in handling COVID-19 with zero COVID policy. And I will show you that trend was disrupted by the end of 2022. So Chinese people perceived the poor performance of American government in handling COVID-19. As we know, US suffered enormously in terms of COVID-related deaths, as well as public health in general. Another is that Chinese media also capitalized on the unfortunate kind of suffering of Americans from COVID. So the media was also filled with propaganda. So one's political, the other was a perception that China as a state was more capable in handling COVID than the US. So we designed 4 studies. We anticipated all of this, so we started this topic a long time ago, right after COVID-19. One, we implemented a number of surveys. They're online surveys with non-representative sample, but we try to weight the sample to be nationally representative. But we conducted a number of surveys, online surveys, and this is the first study. Let me show you results using identical question, favorability question. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the following countries or regions? 1 to 4. It's a question that's used by Pew who give you the chart I presented at the beginning. That came from Pew Research Institute. And we use the same item in a number of surveys in China. And this is the key result. The first time we used the item was end of 2019. And then we repeated the question several times, and it went down, kept going down until end of 2022. We all know that COVID-19, zero COVID policy was ended in December or November, December of 2022. So by that time, beginning 2023, we knew something was going to change because Chinese suffered enormously from the abrupt and rapid ending, unprepared ending of 2022, end of 2022, zero COVID policy. And sure enough, we did design another survey in March 2023. We do see a rebound in attitude toward the US by March 2022. So we believe the trend is quite credible, even though the survey was not truly nationally representative, but the trend was quite clear. That's the first study. And the second study, again, it's a mirror of the study, the third study from the first part, social media data. You can always track sentiment, public sentiment on social media. And Chinese version of Twitter is Weibo. So we use Weibo to track changes in public opinion of the US over the period. Again, before 2019, attitude was quite flat. Was 2019, before the COVID, attitude began to decline. This is related to Meng Wanzhou and trade war and so on. So before COVID, a year from COVID, attitudes toward US began to decline. But after COVID-19 in 2020 all the way to end of 2022, you see a continuation of the declining attitudes among Chinese toward the US until end of 2022. It's a magic that from social media data, you get exactly the same trend as you get from social survey. You don't have to believe in one data source, but 2 data sources give the same trend, gives us some confidence that social fact is real, whether you like it or not. This is both for my American friends and for my Chinese friends, which things have not changed, but things have changed over the period. Okay, the third study of the second part is a quasi-experiment. As I told you, the first time we implemented the survey was end of 2019. And the survey was supposed to be finished by February 2020. But then COVID came, so we had to halt the survey. We stopped the operation of the survey. And then we did not resume the survey until situation got stabilized in April 2020. So that provided us a quasi-experiment because we suddenly halted the survey due to COVID-19 and resumed it in April after the situation was stabilized. Then we can use respondents' answers to the same questionnaire because it's the same survey, But at different time of the suspension of the operation was accidental due to COVID. And then we also compare the respondents' responses to question about US compared to their responses to other countries, including China, Germany. We have German scholars. Chinese didn't change their attitudes between December 2019 and April 2020, but they did change their attitudes towards US significantly between the two waves after the suspension. Again, this is a difference in difference because there's nothing that changed about attitudes toward Japan, India, Pakistan, and Tanzania, everything almost the same in before and after kind of comparison. The only before and after change or difference is their attitude toward the US. And again, this is due to sudden, unexpected halt, a suspension of the survey operation. We believe this provides a quasi-experiment in testing, in evaluating the effect, the causal effect of COVID on Chinese attitude towards the US. And that's a third study. The final study, I use CFPS, China Family Panel Study, which I direct at Peking University. Many of you have used the data. In that data set, almost every year from 2012, we have had a question. If they trust Americans in that survey, we have had that item for a long, long time. Of course, we have that item 2018 and 2020. In 2020, their attitudes to that question was affected by COVID-19. And so we have a before and after comparison within CFPS as longitudinal. So at the individual level, we have two measures, 2018 and their change in 2020. So this is within person change. And not only that, we also know, as insider, we know when the interview was conducted. And because the interview took a while to complete for the survey, but then you know when a particular interview was conducted. So we appended both the pre-treatment measurement and post-treatment measurement and extra information about attention to US pandemic. So we have a Baidu index, how much attention Chinese public paid, the attention paid to pandemic in the US. So there's an intensity public attention measure to US pandemic by every day. That's an everyday search index. This is like a Google kind of a search index. And we have a variety of other measures. This is a daily measure of trade war and many others, for example. The only thing that turns out to be important, of course, we see a general decline attitude or trust of Americans from 2018 to 2020. The general trust of Americans declined significantly between the 2 years. In a way, that's not true. We also ask other groups, trust of strangers, trust of local government, trust of doctors, and so on, relatives. But the trust of Americans significantly declined between 2018 and 2020. That's the first thing we observe. Second thing we observe is that the decline is more significant on a daily basis depending on when the interview was conducted. When public attention to pandemic was strong for a country, the decline, the attitude, the trust of Americans is lower for those respondents. So we see a negative association between public attention to pandemic in the US and the trust level of Americans. So let me conclude. We have observed a marked and a significant decline in Chinese attitudes toward the US between late 2019 and end of 2020. This is evidence that the impact of COVID-19 is causal. The rise in Chinese unfavorability towards the US closely corresponds to the heightened Chinese attention to the pandemic situation in the US. And this trend is mirrored by similar decline in Americans' attitudes toward China during the same period. And to me, this is a great concern. Thank you.